On playback. Yep. Whoa, Jordan's angry today. That's his fucking face. What is happening, everybody? Welcome to MLB Live Before Lock, where, goddamn, I couldn't make you laugh with that. Fuck. I thought you were gonna laugh right before the show started. What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the show. If you haven't done it, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And today's a special day because it is the last weekday regular season NBA slate. So we've got our playback show later on tonight, where MLB Live Before Lock, NBA Live Before Lock, then the playback show with myself and Josh. We're still going to be doing playback shows regularly going forward, but just the last regular season night playback show. So looking forward to that. It should be fun. And we're sponsored by DraftKings Pick 6 here today. Got a baseball slate to talk about. The Yankees game has already been ruled out. Joined here by Matt Belman and Jordan Klein producing. Matt, what's happening, man?
Nothing. Yeah, you mentioned it. The Yankees-Cleveland game is rained out. It is not pretty outside here, so I'm not surprised at that at all. Other than that, though, really no weather spots. We've finally got like a big main slate to talk over. I'm kind of hyped about it.
Yeah, somebody in the chat is also saying that it is the last Friday of the NHL regular season. Joseph Ramirez saying that. And yeah, it's I'm aware the NHL season is ending. I didn't realize that today was also the last NHL regular season Friday. It makes sense when you consider that the NBA and NHL start and end at roughly the same time. I guess I should have figured it. It just didn't occur to me to think about it all that much. And yeah, Stephen Leibowitz saying Eric and Aton did a fun PGA show on playback this afternoon. Yeah, we're going to try to find other ways to put content out on playback as well. I put something out on Twitter to just ask people what it is that they would like to see us do over on playback. And for a little bit more insight onto playback, they are working on deals for other sports leagues, but nothing is done at the moment. So at some point during the summer, we're going to be able to show baseball games on playback from the MLB. So not exactly sure what else we're going to be doing on there for post-lock shows. But yeah, stuff like what Eric and Aton did, where they're able to just pull up the PGA for the Masters leaderboard, and then they're able to show some of the highlights from there. That's stuff we could do. But yeah, eventually I do envision that like every single sporting league is going to be on playback, and then we could just have all different kinds of content all throughout the day. But yeah, if there's anything at all that you guys have as a suggestion or something you would like to see us do, keeping in mind that in the immediate future, we're not going to be able to show other sports on TV. We'll still do NBA watch alongs where we can't show the national TV games, but Josh and I could watch the games in there. So if that's something you guys like, that's something we could do as well. We'll see whatever's most popular. But anyway, let's talk about baseball tonight, Matt. We've got a pretty decent sized slate, which is a nice little departure from what we've been seeing with like little 3, 4, 5 game slates as of late. So lots of spots to talk about, lots of different pitchers, lots of chalk. And let's start with the high end here, where I consider Kevin Gausman to be on a tier of his own, where Gausman is projected for north of 30% ownership, the most popular pitcher on the slate. He's at home pitching against the Colorado Rockies. We know that's about as elite matchups get. What do you make of Kevin Gausman as a pay-up option when considering the great matchup, but also weighing that he is projected for the most ownership of any pitcher on the slate?
I don't care about the ownership. The thing I'm worried about is his dip in velocity last start. And He only made one spring training start. He was slow to get going. He hasn't thrown a ton of pitches so far this year. That said, I still love Gausman. I'm a huge Gausman fan. I'm not overly concerned with the drop in velocity. His ownership is there, but nothing I'm concerned with. And with ownership getting spread out in bats, it's easy to get different, even if using Gausman. So I like him a lot here.
Yeah, to your point, he got absolutely wrecked in his last start. One thing that does make me feel a little bit better about him, he pitched very well in his first start of the year. And also, this start that he got lit up, he was on the road against the Yankees. That's just going to happen to pitchers from time to time. That you're gonna go into New York, you're going to face an elite lineup. Every once in a while, those hitters are going to be making contact, and when they do, it's going to be some big wayward numbers that pitchers give up. So his first start of the year, where he was on a pitch restriction, so only went 4 1/3 innings, but struck out 6 hitters, had no walks, follows it up, start against the Yankees, pitches just 1 inning, gives up 5 runs in that spot. I think the only question I would ask you to see what your opinion is on this, because I'm not too concerned about the velocity for Gausman. I do think it's going to come back as the season goes on. And then also, the matchup is great today as well against the Rockies. I mean, almost any pitcher could find success against the Rockies. Really, my biggest concern with Gausman is, considering he pitched well in his first start, but only went 4 1/3 innings. Are you worried about a pitch count at all?
I wouldn't say pitch count, but I think that goes back into, again, he only made one spring training start. It was dealing with an injury, so got late to get going. So I don't think he's like capped out, but I don't think they're going to like extend him too deep. And if he's struggling, that probably means they're going to take him out a little bit earlier than expected. But even with all that baked in, he's still the number one option by a good amount in my mind.
Totally agree. It's not like he's an all-in guy for me or anything like that, because it is a, significant size slate. But with that said, he's currently in a little bit more than half my lineups, showing up in 51% of my top 150 lineups in the Sims. And with that being the case, he's somebody I'm going to have to prioritize. So Kevin Gausman, my most rostered pitcher and my most rostered player on the entire slate. Really like him on the high end. And even despite some of the inconsistencies in his first couple of starts, I still think you guys want to be playing him in cash games, just because he's pitching against the Rockies. Against the Rockies, almost any pitcher we're going to want to roster. So fair to assume you're on the same page here. If somebody's playing on FanDuel, you're playing Gausman in cash, somebody's playing on DraftKings is one of your 2 cash pitchers.
Yeah, definitely. And even though he's the most expensive pitcher and like you want a huge score out of him, that's not really how baseball works usually. Yes, sometimes you get these Blancos or Glasnows that break the slate, but 9 times out of 10, it's the hitting, and you just need your pitching to be good to great, So I like Gausman a lot here.
All right, let's look at some of the other pay up options where we have ownership going to Freddie Peralta at $9,300. He's your other popular pitcher over on DraftKings, projected for 29% ownership. One of 3 pitchers that are projected for north of 20% ownership, including Kevin Gausman. We'll hit on the other pitchers that are popular as of late. So let's look at all the pitchers who are 8,500 or more and group them together here, Matt. We've got Yamamoto, Freddie Peralta, Bryce Miller, Max Fried, Michael Wacha. Of these pitchers, Fried projected for 16% ownership. Bryce Miller is at 13%. And they've got Freddie Peralta, the chalk pitcher, at 29%. Are you surprised to see how much ownership is going to Freddie Peralta when you consider that he's on the road against the Baltimore Orioles?
Yes and no. So yes, just because of what you said, on the road in Baltimore. No, because his strikeout upside, and I know we've talked about this, like one hitter doesn't really matter, but Adley Rutschman being out tonight for James McCann is a big boost to Peralta. So I'm sure that that's gotten the field even a little bit more on him. I don't like him as much as the field, but it's not like I don't understand the ownership.
That's where I'm at as well, where I look at it, it's like, sure, if we're looking at this ownership agnostic and we're just looking at all these pitchers, and it's like, okay, I could understand why I would want to be getting to Freddie Peralta, just in terms of he's a really high strikeout pitcher. But then when you also factor in what his ownership is in this matchup, still somebody to be getting to, but I just don't get as much as what the field does. So I'm about half of the field right now. I have ownership in the teens. He wouldn't be a consideration for me for single entry, not a cash game consideration either, because once again, I'm a little bit afraid of the matchup. But considering that he's somebody that has strikeout upside, not like a full fade or anything, but just I don't have as much interest as the field does, which seems to also be where you're at.
Yeah, I'm spot on with how you put it. Like, if ownership wasn't a thing and you just had me pick who the two pitchers I'd want to roster were, it'd probably be Gaussman and maybe Peralta, but like maybe not. And he's getting the ownership. So I'm cool not playing him. I'm very scared of the matchup. I actually like a couple Baltimore bats, which wish Rutschman was in the lineup, but what can you do?
Yeah, it's a Baltimore Orioles lineup that it's not like the best in baseball, because the best in baseball that's the Atlanta Braves, the Los Angeles Dodgers, maybe the New York Yankees on that tier. I consider them to be a little bit lower, but there's like ridiculously good offenses that are stacked that we have in the MLB right now. The Orioles are like the second tier of offense, which is still very imposing, just not quite as good as some of those other offenses. So Freddie Peralta has upside. I just don't think that he warrants the kind of ownership he's picking up. So I'll be underweight to the field to him relative to that mark. If we look at all of the other pitchers that are in this sort of price range, and once again, I grouped these guys together from Yamamoto at $9,600 to Michael Walk at $8,500. Who is your favorite contrarian option? So if you're looking to get away from Freddie Peralta and pivot, who's a lower owned guy that you might prefer in this price range?
I like Freed. I know he's not like low owned, but I'm a big Freed guy in general. Two awful starts coming to start the year, but much tougher matchups. Now gets to land in Miami against the Marlins. I like Freed here. I don't love him, but I like him.
It's gonna be Yamamoto for me. I'm a believer in Yamamoto, and
Same.
he's projected for 2% ownership. Only 2% ownership going to Yamamoto. And I mean, all projections suggest that he should be one of the best pitchers in baseball this year. His first start of the year wasn't ideal. He got his ass kicked, but he was pitching against the Los Angeles Dodgers. It was a weird game. They're playing over in Korea. It was a really, really difficult setup to make your first ever career start. Since then, he's looked really good, though. So overall, we've now seen 3 starts out of Yamamoto. His ERA 4.09. Once again, a little bit off what I think we should expect from him, just because that first start was such an outlier. But even despite that, the underlying numbers are pretty good on him. 3.22 ERA, 1.58 FIP here for him. His average fastball velocity, 96 miles per hour, 32% K rate. He's getting a lot of strikeouts, getting a lot of swing and misses. I'm still a believer that Yamamoto is likely going to be one of the best overall pitchers in baseball. And then also, just as kind of an aside, a betting angle to throw at this as well, he is still plus 260, plus 250 to win Rookie of the Year. I think that's a very good bet. I think he should be minus money to win that award at this point. So Yamamoto, if the field is really going to just totally avoid this guy, 2% owned, that's a very easy mark for me to get overweight to in large field tournaments.
I get that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being overweight on him in large field. My questions are twofold. One, he hasn't thrown a ton of pitches. 80 pitches was the most he's thrown. That was the last start. Maybe he throws more today, maybe not. And also, like, I know the tools aren't gospel and it's not the Bible, but we are really, really low on Yamamoto here comparative to a lot of other pitchers. And I know you've talked about this a lot. It's not a good matchup at all.
The other thing, though, about him, though, outside of that is, even if you say, like, hey, we're lower on him compared to other pitchers, while that is true, I mean, we still have him with a 9% chance of being one of the top 2 scoring pitchers on the slate at 2%.
You're right. It's all jumbled. It's all jumbled. So, like, a percentage point here or there makes him, a top 5 guy instead of where he is now. So it's a good point.
And then another thing too is when you look at the leverage, even though we don't have him projected particularly well relative to other pitchers, he's still the second most under-owned pitcher on the entire slate in the top pitchers tool.
Yeah, no, fair points. And I think that there are definitely cases to use. I mean, if I were multi-entering, I'd be over the field. I guess from my point of view, just not someone I feel comfortable with using in like single entry, 3-entry max stuff. Maybe I'm wrong there though.
And by the way, if you guys have any questions for us in Discord, hit me up. One of the perks of being a Stochastic sub, which you could sign up for any Stochastic package using the links we have below. If you want to sign up for the lineup generator package, we'll have some lineups in the lineup generator in a little bit. That is less than $15. That is going to have lineups built for you. It also gets you access to our Discord channel. If you want to buy the Sims package, if you want to get the data package, whatever it is that's for you, we've got packages at different price points for all different kinds of DFS players. Links for all of those to sign up below in the description box. And every single one of them comes with access to our Discord channel, where we are getting a couple of questions right now, starting here with BBC in Mouth 8, who wants to know, all right, well, he's asking about, oh, okay. I thought he was asking a question to Eric. He's just making fun of Eric in the question. So totally different. Fair game, BBC. He wants to know, what pitcher will I nut to? Probably none of them, if I'm going to be honest. Yamamoto, the pitcher relative to his ownership, I like, but not necessarily my type. And then he wants to know what pitcher will give me ED like Eric. So pitcher I like being overweight to on the whole. Yamamoto, underweight to Freddie Peralta, but really just because Freddie Peralta is projected for nearly 30% ownership. For yourself there, Matt, if you had to pick one pitcher on the slate to be overweight to and one pitcher to be underweight to at their current ownerships, which would you pick?
I'm glad you put it like that instead of taking it so many other ways you could have. Um, I think the contrarian guy that I like that I'm going to be over the field on is Ryan Feltner. The chalky guy that I'm going to be underweight on is Peralta.
All right. The next question we have here is from Hey, I'm Drew. He says, I see Reed Detmers at large ownership. What are your thoughts? Is he a good SP2 for cash? Yes. If you're building a lineup right now for cash games, which it seems like that is what you're doing, there are 3 chalky pitchers that we have on the slate. And I think that these are the 3 you're considering for a DraftKings cash game. You are going to be looking at Kevin Gausman, who's projected for 33% ownership, Freddie Peralta at 28% ownership, Reed Detmers at 26%. So of those 3 guys, I think you want to pick 2 out of the 3 for cash games. My preferred choices are Gausman and Detmers. Would Detmers be your SP2, assuming we're already looking at Gausman as our SP1, or is there somebody else you prefer?
Yeah, I guess so. Just follow the ownership. I don't love Detmers here, but his strikeout upside, even if he gets hit around a little bit, is really high. So yeah, Detmers and Gausman sounds good to me, unless you can get to Peralta and Gausman.
The other one that I think you can maybe consider is Max Fried. It's early on in the season, and I generally don't like to look too much at small sample sizes, but it's hard to feel good about Max Fried in any matchup in cash games, particularly when his price hasn't gone down. Maybe if Max Fried was like $7,200, you could look at him as an SP2 in cash games, but $8,700 for Max Fried, I like it for tournaments. But for a cash game, when you look at him and say that, hey, he's pitched 5 innings so far this year, he has really struggled to throw strikes, 12.5% walk rate, 18.8% strikeout rate. So an 18 ERA, 6.4 expected ERA. The biggest sweat with Max Fried in his start so far. We played him in DFS. It's like, oh my God, can he make it out of the first inning? Your lineup's already dead if you roster him to this point this year. We were just kind of sweating, like, are we going to get a second inning out of Max Fried? Which has been a tricky thing for him to accomplish so far this year. He's only thrown 5 innings in 2 starts. So as far as Max Fried goes, like, yeah, I like him for tournaments. I think he gets back on track sooner rather than later, but I would be concerned to play him in a cash game.
I agree. I think it's Detmers or Peralta with Gausman. I think you could play 2 of the 3. I don't even think you have to play Gausman because all 3 of them will be owned.
And then we've also got all right. BBC says not the question I asked. Listen, I don't know what the question I don't know what you intended to ask there. I know you asked the question, but no, I'm not nutting to a pitcher on the slate today. None of them. There's the answer to your question. And then yeah, so just to wrap up from Hey, I'm Drew. Yeah, I think that Reed Detmers is a pretty solid SP2 option for cash games. And then Snips1234 said, Matt said that he likes Feltner. He wants me to ask you why.
So like is an operative word, but very, very encouraged by what I've seen from him so far this year. He's got like an 18% strikeout rate. He was dominant last time out at home against Tampa. Wasn't great against Arizona, but wasn't awful either. And, you know, I know those matchups are tough, kind of like this one against Toronto, but Toronto's full of righties. He's 5,600. I don't love pitching on this slate. I'm not going to go all in on him, but I think he's more talented than a $5,600 pitcher, and the field isn't getting to him at all.
Yeah, so let's see. Feltner, did I land on him at all? No, I mean, on a slate of this size, for me, I just don't think I have to go quite that deep for a starting pitcher. So he's not going to really make lineups for myself personally, but I also do understand where it is that Matt is coming from there. And hey, Sean V has got your stamp of approval in chat. He's saying Feltner showed a lot of improvement in spring and it's carried over. So maybe he's a new man to open up the
The
year.
other thing I'll say, which increases my interest in him, is Jake Irvin at 5,200 projected for 17% ownership. Feltner 5,600, 2.5%. So that's something right there.
And now we've got a question from Mr. Cool Cam. Mr. Cool Cam wants to know, who is our favorite pitcher and contrarian stack on FanDuel for a tournament? So we'll talk about stacks in a little bit, but first, favorite contrarian pitcher over on FanDuel. So I don't really understand the ownership on FanDuel right now. Kevin Gausman's projected for sub 10% ownership. I would still play him in cash games. I don't understand why the field isn't getting to him at all.
I'm with you. I actually seeing this, I was already kind of thinking this on DK. I could see Peralta and Detmers ending up higher owned than Gausman just because of how Gausman was in his last start. Detmers just carved up this Boston team. Like, I don't think that's what should happen, but I could see it, especially after seeing the FanDuel ownership.
Just because of the matchup, I still think he's going to end up being pretty popular. I would guess he comes in a little bit more owned than what our FanDuel ownership is. I think our DraftKings ownership is probably correct. FanDuel, I think, might be a little bit low there. But just like if I'm just basing it off of what our ownership is, I am going to guess. Well, I'm going to say that Gausman is my favorite. I'm just guessing that he's going to come in more popular than that. So let's try to find somebody else. Who's a pitcher who's not Kevin Gausman projected for single digit ownership that we like a good amount for FanDuel tournaments?
I'm going to go with the guy we didn't even talk about on DK yet because a lot of guys are falling through the cracks. Andrew Abbott, projected for 7% ownership. I like him on both FanDuel and DK.
It's a good matchup for him going up against that Chicago White Sox team that is really just absolutely terrible. The White Sox, they've got nothing good going for them. They also have a shitty farm system, which, not exactly what we talk about on this show, but it's incredible how they've been able to build such a poor team. And then even like their exciting players, like Luis Robert gets hurt all of the time. I'm going to agree with you on Andrew Abbott. I was trying to make a case to maybe go for somebody else. Luis Severino is somebody else who I'm kind of considering. We like Severino as a contrarian option in his last start. I still do like him as a contrarian option. Again, I'm going to be talking about him a little bit more from a DraftKings perspective as well. So I do agree with you on Andrew Abbott, but I'll add Luis Severino to the conversation. Pitching at home against the Kansas City Royals, a lot of good early returns from Severino. And if you look at his numbers so far for the year, 3.6 ERA, 3.77 expected ERA, the fastball velocity, 97 miles per hour on average now. And then the strikeout rate, 27.1% for him. A lot of people were really sour and down on Severino coming into the year. And it's not that he's had like the greatest Cy Young sort of performances to open up the season, but I feel like through two starts, we've been on the right side of him based on just like the totality of what the results have been.
Yeah, you were even higher on him last start than I was. And in his first start, the numbers weren't great, but the underlying stuff was. And he was good last time out. I'm with you on Severino. Like, I'm not saying he's back to the Severino of old, but I think people quickly forgot like how good he actually was. And you don't need him to be all the way back to be worth it at 6,800.
Yeah, and I mean, he's going to be somebody else we'll talk about on DraftKings in a little bit here when we get to the cheaper price points. He's $8,000 over on FanDuel, but even at that salary, at 4% ownership, he's somebody who I think is worth getting to in lineups. But let's talk about the next range of pitchers here, Matt. We'll talk about the rest of the guys in the 8K range. We got Michael King. We've got Trevor Rogers. And these are two pitchers in just unplayable matchups, in my opinion. But then we've got Andrew Abbott on DK. We've got Reed Detmers, who's really popular. Tanner Houck at $8,400. I'll start with this. What are you going to do with Reed Detmers relative to his ownership? Because I think everybody's going to recognize he's a pitcher with a lot of upside. There's a lot of strikeout potential there. He's also relatively cheap for his upside at $8,400. Do you like him more or less than his 26% ownership, though?
I like him less, but definitely one where I could be looking back at this slate and think, wow, Detmers is way too cheap at 8,300 just because of his strikeout upside. I'm just not completely buying what he's selling so far this year. The field clearly is. So I don't love like the Boston stack against him. I don't hate that either, but I just like other pitchers on this slate that aren't getting the love he's getting.
Yeah, and for Reed Detmers, he is my favorite pitcher in this price range, but ultimately, when I'm figuring out my final ownerships, I'm getting to him as my second most rostered pitcher behind Gausman and the Sims right now. But I actually am inclined to give him a negative ROI boost to lower that a little bit because it's a fairly tough matchup for him on the road against Boston. It's a lot of ownership. There's a lot of pitchers that are much lesser owned that I want to get some exposure to in tournaments. And if I'm crazy heavy on Reed Detmers, there's an opportunity cost there where I'd rather be like closer to in line with the field on Detmers than be like insanely overweight or anything like that. But where I'm most interested in some of the pitching options for this, anything else you want to add about the 8K pitchers?
No, I will say, and I wrote him up, like Michael King really stands out from a leverage perspective. Similar to Yamamoto, to be quite honest. The tools have him at 9% chance of being a top two pitcher, 1% ownership. Like I said this earlier on the show with Lofty. If I didn't know anything about baseball and I was just looking at the tools, King would be maybe a priority play for me, just looking at what our tools have to say. Now, that's not the case, so I probably won't play King in this matchup, but just wanted to shout that out.
Yeah, I don't think. Let me see. Do I have any lineups with King? I've got 2 out of 150. So the answer is not really. I wouldn't tell anybody who's playing, 1 or 2 lineups to go ahead and play him there. It's just too difficult of a matchup for me on the road against the Dodgers on such a big slate with so many other pitching options. So I'm going to be going elsewhere with some of my pitcher exposures. Let's look at the 7K range where there's not a single pitcher double digit owned in the 7K range, Matt. We've got Jordan Wicks, Tyler Wells, Paul Blackburn, Brandon Pfaadt, Steven Matz, Dane Dunning. The most popular of these pitchers is Blackburn, actually at 9% against the Washington Nationals. And yeah, he's got a pretty solid matchup. Are there any pitchers you really liking in the 7K range though? Because there's nobody that I personally have double digit exposure to out of any of these 7K pitchers.
No one I love. My favorite's Wicks. I know that you've got a soft spot for Seattle, but they have been atrocious to start the season,
Yep.
striking out at the highest rate in baseball. They've been equally bad against righties and lefties. We just saw them get carved by Barrios, Bassett, and Kikuchi. I'm not a huge believer in Wicks, but I think he's got a live arm. He's faced the Dodgers and another good team so far this year. I can't think of it off the top of my head, and he's been decent. So kind of a soft landing spot for him in Seattle. I understand that Seattle still has upside and their lineup's not going to be trash forever, but it's not a bad spot from a strikeout perspective. So I think he's my favorite of the bunch, but as you said, not a priority or even close to it.
Yeah, he's the pitcher I have the most exposure to of any pitcher in this range. And that means I have 6% of him at the moment. So kind of hard for me to really advocate for anybody in this range. But when we start to look at punt pitchers, Luis Severino, JP France, Chris Flexen, Ryan Feltner, Jake Irvin. I know you had mentioned that you don't mind Ryan Feltner as a contrarian play. While Luis Severino, not necessarily contrarian per se, because he is picking up double digit ownership. It's not a crazy amount. 14% ownership for Severino. I've got over 20% of him. I just talked about liking him as a contrarian option on FanDuel. I feel the same way over on DraftKings. The early returns have been really positive on Severino. Is he going to get hurt a month from now? Yeah, in all likelihood. It could be anything. He's torn Achilles before. He's had elbow issues. He's had shoulder issues. He's had knee issues. The guy is hurt like every single part of his body to this point. But this is his third start of the season. His average fastball velocity is 97 miles per hour. He's generating a lot of swing and misses. He's throwing strikes. He's not walking anybody. He's a 27% K rate and a 4% walk rate. Despite all the injuries, the guy's still throwing 97 miles per hour. I know he sucked last year, but he's $6,800 in a decent matchup against the Kansas City Royals, and people aren't really rostering him. We saw this the same thing last time out as well, where people didn't want to play Severino, largely because there was a bad scoring decision in his first start against the Milwaukee Brewers, where there was that ground ball hit to Zach Short, and it should have been ruled an error. It was ruled a hit. Ultimately, the scorekeepers went back and overturned it and changed it to an error, but I think he would have been a lot more popular in his second start of the season against the Cincinnati Reds had that play been ruled an error in real time, because then he would have had a good fantasy performance. So Luis Severino, I'm going to be overweight to him. He's my favorite punt option relative to his salary.
So wait, the call got changed later but after his fantasy score, after the slate was like finalized,
It got changed a week later.
that was one of those. That's crazy. Like you're so right about that. That's a great point. Like,
The
and
only
yet,
the only reason I realized it is because I've been looking at Severino's numbers a lot, just kind of in general, and all of a sudden his ERA changed really drastically, and then I looked up some scoring changes, and I realized that it was changed from a hit to an error. It was something too in real time. We were watching it, and some of the guys in Discord as well, where we were going back and forth about it, and we were like, "There's no way that that's a hit." It was just like so clearly an error, and it got ruled a hit, and then they finally changed it like a week later. But that's why his ERA for the season is the what is it 3.77 now or something like that. Yeah, a 3.6. There's 3.77 expected ERA. So he has a 3.6 ERA, but yeah, if he still had those runs tacked onto him, then his ERA is like 6 or something like that.
yeah, I love that call. And I don't know exactly what to make of this Royals offense. I know they just had a good series against Houston and maybe don't want to go out of my way to like pick on them consistently like some of the other bad teams. And I'm certainly not afraid of them.
Anything else that you're liking for cheap here?
I like Feltner, as I mentioned. I don't hate Jake Irvin, but I don't really love him either. And the ownership's pretty out of control there.
Anything else at all you want to add about pitchers here? If not, then we'll build some lineups in the lineup generator before talking about stacks.
Nope, I think we got it.
All right, Jordan, pull up the lineup generator. Let's build some lineups in that. And I also want to let people know as Jordan's getting that situated, we build lineups out in there. We've got a deal going on. UFC 300 is going to be taking place tomorrow. This is the most excited I've been for a UFC card in quite a bit of time. And if you guys want to sign up for any MMA package at all over on the site, whether the Sims package, the data package, a weekly package, a monthly package, you guys get access for 30% off when you sign up using the promo code 300. Understand the numbers there, right? 300, 30% off. Just sign up using one of the links below. Enter that promo code 300. If you guys are going to be playing UFC lineups this weekend for UFC 300, I cannot advocate for our Sims tools more. I've won the $3 contest 4 times so far this year using our Sims tools, so it's really helped my process. So yeah, you could build lineups in there for DraftKings, for FanDuel and the Sims tools. And for right now, Ryan Redenbaum wants us to build lineups in the lineup generator for DraftKings and FanDuel. And absolutely, we're going to be covering lineups for both sites. So let me make this bigger so I give myself, not that I'm going to be able to see the screen perfectly anyway, but to give myself the best chance to see the screen as clearly as possible. I've really blown this up on my bigger computer over here, Matt. So we're going to build lineups for both DraftKings and FanDuel. We'll start with DraftKings, though. Go all stack types, Jordan. And let's go balance lineups. Pretty big slate here. Let's go balanced. Don't lock anybody in. Give it the skip there. Yeah, save some lineups here, and then we'll go ahead and we'll look at the exposures of all the lineups that we're getting to, and we'll check to see what that is comparing to some of the stuff that we personally might be liking, Matt. We'll be seeing our exposures here on the screen in a second. And don't forget also, if you guys do want to sign up for the lineup generator, it's less than $15. There's a link for that below in the description box. Now, let's see what we're getting to here. No real surprises. Kevin Gausman in a bunch of our lineups, Reed Detmers as well. That's the same thing I was more or less getting to in the Sims. Lots of Gausman, lots of Detmers. Detmers a good option. I'm going to be lowering his ROI a little bit in the Sims tool just to kind of spread out my exposures a little bit here. Are you surprised with this at all, Matt? Detmers, Gausman, and Freddie Peralta is our top 3 most rostered pitchers.
Nah, not even a little bit.
Scroll down a little bit, Jordan. I want to see what other pitchers showed up because it looks like we've got about 50% pitcher exposure left there. Max Fried showing up in some lineups. Sensible. Jake Irvin. That's a little bit surprising to me, but it's only one lineup here out of all the lineups that we've built. So click on the stack exposures now, Jordan. I want to see what the stack options that we're getting to are looking like. Lots of Reds, lots of Blue Jays. Some Oakland is a good man, Jordan, making that bigger, helping my eyes see things. So between the Reds, the Blue Jays, is it shocking to you that either of those teams are showing up in a bunch of lineups?
No, I mean, the Reds are the top stack on the board. The Blue Jays aren't far behind them. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, Blue Jays, they are picking up a decent amount of exposure against Ryan Feltner, but I understand wanting to get there for sure. And then we've got the Oakland A's. Oakland A's showing up in a whole bunch of lineups here against Jake Irvin. Irvin was also, he showed up in like 1 out of those 20 lineups. Are the Oakland A's a value / contrarian team that you see yourself getting to today? We do have them with, what is it, 11.4% chance of being the top value, so the second best value stack of the day. These likely aren't 5-man stacks of the Oakland A's, but do you like these players to get to as a secondary stack to save salary?
I don't hate it because I think it's definitely a slate where you can spend up on pitching and there are expensive bats. Jake Irvin's not someone I'm afraid to pick on. Ownership is there, so I don't love it. It's not sneaky. They're not expected to be high owned, but 3% chance of being the top stack, 6% ownership. The best thing working in their favor, as you mentioned, is the value.
Yeah, so I'm looking at my lineups, and I don't have very many 5-man stacks of the Oakland A's. I have some of them, but I do have a bunch of players from Oakland just kind of mixed into my lineups. I'll look at the individual exposures here to them. Yeah, so players on the Oakland A's just as one-off bats. I get to a lot of these guys as one-offs. So let me sort them by the exposures here. All right, so my Oakland exposures, yeah, like Seth Brown is one of my most rostered one-offs. Langoliers is one of my most rostered catchers. Langoliers has been on a crazy power surge. He had that game where he had 3 homers where it was like random chalk, and people just kept playing Langoliers ever since then. But Seth Brown, Langoliers, Abraham Toro, JD Davis, I'm getting to double-digit exposure to all of these guys.
I mean, I don't love it, but it's not like it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, not like for full 5-man stacks or anything like that, but save salary. One-offs, I think this is a relatively good team to get to. And then as far as some of the other hitters go that we're getting good exposure to, scroll all the way to the top, Jordan. Yeah, Vladdy, Ellie De La Cruz, Jonathan India, Justin Turner, George Springer, Jake Fraley, Dalton Varsho, Tyler Stevenson, Alejandro Kirk. No surprises here. It's just players who are correlating with the stacks that we got to most. So yeah, nothing else that stands out to me. Anything else that is standing out to you from these lineups, Matt?
No, I don't think so.
All right, so let's build some FanDuel lineups and see what's looking different on the FanDuel side of things. And same deal in the lineup generator here. Let's go FanDuel, all stack types, and we'll build balance lineups again. Big slate. I'm expecting once again that we're going to get to Gaussman a good amount, Detmers, Max Fried, maybe on FanDuel. Let's see. You're very good at clicking, Jordan. Very good at clicking. All right, let's see what the pitcher exposures are. Yeah, 28% Gaussman for us, 28% Reed Detmers, 17% of Freddie Peralta. So that's what, 56, 73% of our lineups. And then I assume there's just some other guys. Yeah, Andrew Abbott in 10% of lineups there. All right. Yeah, Andrew Abbott. You liked Andrew Abbott as a contrarian play. Lineup generator also getting us to some lineups there. So I think that's something that definitely looks pretty good for us as far as pitcher exposure, spread out while prioritizing some of the best pitching options as far as our stack exposures for FanDuel in the lineup generator. A lot of the same sorts of teams, Toronto showing up, Cincinnati, Houston showing up more predominantly on FanDuel, though. Let's see, what do we have for them over in the top stacks tool on FanDuel? And then the Mets showing up in some lineups. But as far as the Astros go, yeah, I mean, Dane Dunning is the opposing pitcher. The Astros are the second most popular offense overall on the FanDuel slate. I understand why people are stacking them against Dane Dunning. Also, the price tags aren't all that outrageous on the Houston Astros either. As far as FanDuel is concerned, click on our player exposures, Jordan. Let's see which hitters we ended up getting the most of before we wrap it up here and talk about more stacks. Yeah, Altuve, Bo Bichette, Vladdy, Kyle Tucker, Yordan Alvarez, Jake Fraley, George Springer. So yeah, it's a lot of the hitters that we're getting to the most on DraftKings, same guys that we're seeing over here on FanDuel as well. So yeah, that's gonna pretty much do it for the FanDuel side of things in the lineup generator. Any other points you want to make? Anything that stands out to you?
No, but we are about to hop into just overall stack discussion. And it is interesting as the show and the day has gone on, how much more love Cincinnati's getting.
Yeah. We'll talk about that in a second here, although I do want to get back to Mr. Cool Cam's question. He wanted to know who our favorite contrarian pitcher was for FanDuel. So one other thing that I want to ask you before we talk about stacks in a broader sense is if you're looking at the FanDuel side of things, is there a contrarian stack do you like getting to differentiate lineups for tournaments?
On FanDuel, I think my favorite contrarian stack is going to be, oh man, I'm just gonna say the Dodgers because they're so good. I mean, they're hard to get to, but that also is what makes them contrarian. So give me the Dodgers.
I'm going to say the Arizona Diamondbacks at home against Steven Matz. Matz is a pitcher who I've said negative things about in the past, and he's not somebody who's one of my favorite pitchers in baseball. He's fine, but generally he's a pitcher that I do think ends up being a little bit overrated by the masses, and it's a tough matchup for him against the St. Louis Cardinals. To this point so far this year, Matz has seen some easier matchups, and there's some. It's all small sample sizes, but there is some definite concerning signs about his underlying stats. Most notably, he's not getting any swing and misses. 14.6% strikeout rate. If you're pitching on the road against this Arizona team and you're giving up contact, there's power in this offense. They're not afraid to run. They steal bases at the top of the order. So I think there's upside in the Arizona Diamondbacks against Steven Matz, who, while he does have a 1.74 ERA to open up the season, like I just said, he's not generating strikeouts. That's a large reason why his expected ERA is 4.63. So Steven Matz is a pitcher who's seen a lot of good luck so far to open up the year. There is no ownership going to the Diamondbacks over on FanDuel. So that's a contrarian stack that I like getting to. Not that they're like 1% owned or anything, but I think they do warrant more than 5% ownership. Is the Arizona Diamondbacks a team that you're interested in at all?
Yes, they are on both sites. They look about equally as good on DraftKings and FanDuel. Ownership is just not there.
Yeah. What is something frozen over on? No, I think Matt's good over on FanDuel. I think somebody had said that you froze on FanDuel for a second there. So not on FanDuel, on playback, Matt. So people were concerned that you would stop breathing. But I think you're alive.
I am. I think so too.
All right. Just double checking. I was looking a little bit closer. He's alive, fellas. Don't worry. He's alive. If you guys have any other questions for us in Discord, hit me up and I could definitely answer those. We've only got about 15 minutes left here before we turn it over to NBA Live Before Lock. But now looking at the stacks from a broader sense, Matt, what do you want to do with the Cincinnati Reds? They are projected for a ton of ownership. I'm going to refresh to make sure that I'm still looking at the most recent run of ownership because I made myself look like a little bit of an idiot the other day when I was looking at an old ownership number. But we've got the Cincinnati Reds projected for 12% ownership. The only team on the slate that's projected for north of 7% ownership. Very spread out as far as the ownership goes. So for the Reds, first, how are you going to handle them in single entry? How popular do you think they might be in those sorts of contests?
Pretty popular. I mean, not like Diamondbacks in cores popular, but I think your rule of thumb is pretty good. Like essentially double the top owned team. And I think that's what it's going to be here. I don't think that ownership is a concern, but they're the highest owned team on a slate with a bunch of teams that look similar to me. So I probably won't play them, but I don't think the ownership is like, oh my God, you shouldn't play them, you know?
Yeah, I'm looking at the Reds. They're not going to be my single entry stack for large field tournaments. They are my third most rostered stack right now, which means I have 8% of them, right? The third most rostered stack on the slate. It's a team I'm getting to, just not as much as what the field is. So the Reds are a team that certainly want to get to in large field tournaments, but I'm going to be a little bit underweight to what their ownership is. And then for single entry, I'd rather look elsewhere, mostly because I do think they're going to be steamed up for those kinds of contests. Super chat 100%. From Corey Randall. Corey's asking us, thoughts on a full Baltimore stack against Peralta at home when Peralta is going to be popular? Do you like the Baltimore Orioles for leverage, Matt?
I do. I hate that Rutschman isn't in the lineup, and they're hard to stack because Henderson leads off at shortstop, and then they have 4 outfielders in a row. They've got 5 outfielders in their lineup. But I like pieces. It's no doubt about it. I don't mind the full stack if you can make it work. Colton Cowser, maybe my favorite bat on the slate. He's got 70 deep DraftKings points over the past 3 games. He's 2,500, hitting second today. This is a top prospect. I like him a lot. I like the top of the lineup a lot. I'm definitely interested.
From like a leverage standpoint, I do understand it, but Freddie Peralta has pitched really well so far this year, and he dealt with some injuries last year. He's also been a very elite starting pitcher in the past. My preferred way to be off of Freddie Peralta is just being a little bit underweight to him in large field tournaments, not necessarily stacking against him in this spot. So, Corey, maybe for like a single entry where Freddie Peralta might be 40% owned instead of the 28% mark, it has a little bit more reason to get there. But for large field tournaments, I'm not going to be very high on the Baltimore Orioles. It's just not a team that I'm getting myself a ton of exposure to. I have a couple stacks of them, but nothing really all that significant. So not the team that I'm going to be recommending you play in some of those single entries. Who is your favorite overall single entry stack to play for this late, Matt?
That's a good question. I think you could quib.
I only ask good questions.
Can That's fair.
If I just showed up on here and I was like, "Hey, Matt, what's your favorite color?"
Yeah, you're right. As an aside, I love baseball slates like this because there is no wrong answer to this question. Like, there's a couple teams where I think you're a little bit out of your mind to say are your favorite stack, but not most of them. Like most of the teams you told me they're your favorite stack, I would see nothing wrong with it. I'm gonna say, all things considered, like prices, ownership, the whole shebang. Oh, that's really tough. Arizona.
Which way do I want to go here? Let me look at some of my exposures right now. Boy, I'm thinking of the team that is the lowest ownership that are getting the most exposure to. This is very Josh of me because I think this is like the only team Josh has stacked so far this year, the New York Mets. Every day Josh posts his MLB exposures in Discord, and he's like 5x the field on the Mets, and I've never been there with him so far, but I am getting to a good amount of the Mets right now in my large field portfolio. I have about 15% Mets stack, so that's 3x the field matchup here against Michael Wacha. So for me, Josh just in chat said stupid Mets. I think I'm with you today, Josh. The Mets are the stack that I'm most overweight to relative to what their current ownership is. It's still an offense that on the whole isn't good, but they have individual good hitters like Francisco Lindor, like Pete Alonso, Francisco Alvarez at catcher. So when we don't have to play all 9 guys in the Mets order and we could just focus on the bats that don't suck, I do think this is a slate where it makes sense to get to the Mets at low ownership.
I've been playing a lot of Mets. That's not a new thing. I'm with you. I will say, I know Josh has been really high in the Mets for like a couple years now. I don't think they're,
it's all like going back to 1997. It's all Josh plays in DFS's Mets stacks.
No, I remember him talking about it last year though, and he was like crazy high in this offense. And like, I think my biggest problem, that's not even a problem with what you just said, is Lindor has not been good at all this year. And there's a lot of opportunity cost there, but I've played him a bunch. If you're stacking the Mets, you want him. He's got power, speed, upside. I mean, he could have a 40 DK point game any one of these games. So I'm with you. Like, I don't love the spot, but I don't hate it either. I think they're reasonable.
Projection models are not high on Michael Wacha this year. So once again, Josh listening, I assume Josh is going to be getting to the Mets again today because Zips, Steamer, the bat, every projection model is not expecting big things from Michael Wacha this year. He's a pitcher who every single model has him projected with a fair talent level of an ERA in the mid 4s. He has gotten off to a decent start this year, but it's 12 innings he's thrown so far. If you look at his numbers last year, he had a 3.22 ERA, but also benefited from a lot of good luck. He had a 4.27 expected ERA. There's a lot that indicates that regression is going to be hitting Michael Wacha at some point fairly hard here. So Michael Wacha, I don't think he's as good as what the public likely thinks he is. So Mets are a stack that are going to be standing out to me a little bit here. What are the other stacks are you prioritizing that look good to you for tonight, Matt?
Man, I'm going to go back to it. I do like Baltimore here. And it's not just the Peralta ownership. They're really good. No, Rutschman sucks, but he's expensive, so easier to play them in one sense. I like Baltimore a lot. I think you kind of have the pick of the litter here with who you like. St. Louis looks really good from a stack tool perspective. Houston looks good. How ownership lands in like a half hour is probably going to play a big role for me. I like Milwaukee. I could see myself landing on Milwaukee here.
The two offenses, there's only two offenses I have double-digit exposure to on the entire slate. It's fairly spread out for me as far as stacking goes. One of them, I already mentioned, it's the New York Mets. The other one right now is the Toronto Blue Jays going up against Ryan Feltner. And to one extent, yeah, like the Blue Jays, they're 7% owned. So I technically it makes them one of the most popular offenses on the slate. But ownership is so spread out at offense that the difference between the second most popular offense on the slate, which is the Braves, who are 7.2% owned, and like the fifth least popular offense, which is 3.7% owned, the difference is fairly narrow between the most and least popular teams. And with that in mind, there's a pitcher in Ryan Feltner here to where, like you had mentioned, he's pitched better so far this year. Sean V brought that up in chat as well. This guy sucked last year, though. And another pitcher who projection models are just not high on at all. Not a guy who projects to generate a lot of strikeouts. Fair talent level with an ERA north of 5. This Toronto Blue Jays offense does have a lot of firepower in it. They're at home, so that is a little bit of a big park upgrade for Ryan Feltner, who's used to pitching in Colorado. But the Toronto Blue Jays, I do think, are one of the higher upside offenses on the slate. There's a lot of power in the lineup. So those are my two most rostered offenses, the New York Mets and the Toronto Blue Jays.
And I will say, like how you're playing it, and it all lumps together, right? Like you like Yamamoto a lot. You're over the field on him. You're getting over the field on some contrarian pitching options. I mean, on slates like this, especially when you're doing that, I would be exactly how you're playing it, be just spreading out my offenses.
We got a question here from MS Media Captain. He wants to know, Matt, do you have 3 favorite one-offs for the slate? Are there any particular one-offs? He said that you had mentioned a rookie earlier in the show that is killing it, and he wanted a little bit more context. I don't know if I can't remember. I assume you were talking about Colton Cowser.
I was,
but I'm not. I don't remember what you'd said at the top of the show.
He is just smashing right now. He's moved up to the 2 hole. He had been hitting 7th. Baltimore came out with a little wonky lineup. He's got 71 fantasy points over his past 3 games. I'm not playing him because of that, but I like seeing that. He's 2,500 hitting 2nd. Lefties against Peralta, obviously prefer that. He's got speed upside. He's my favorite one-off on the slate, like by a good margin. To list 3 of them might be a little bit tough, but we got, I don't even know if I have 3. I think I just have Cowser.
So for me, my 3 favorite one-offs on the slate are Seth Brown, Yordan Alvarez, and Bo Bichette. That's just based on like individual hitters that I'm getting to the most in lineups. I'm overweight to all 3 of them. So those are what I'm going to call my 3 favorite one-offs.
I got one more.
Slate there.
I got one more. This is ugly. But leading off at 3,300, Anthony Rendon. Starting to see the ball better. Walked a couple times in his last game. It's good to see. He's just been a lot better recently. So I'll give him as my second guy.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's easy for him to see the ball better because for the first couple weeks, he was seeing the ball like Ray Charles, where he's just guessing, watching pitches right down the middle, swinging at shit out of the strike zone. Didn't he start the year like 0 for 21?
He did. So again, he's still only hitting 150, but he started like 0 for 20, whatever. He's 3 for his last 8 with a few walks in there, like nothing crazy, but he's 3,300 leading off in a game with the wind blowing out.
Yeah, Josh in chat saying, so glad you didn't say Stevie Wonder. Yeah, because Stevie Wonder could see. He's faking it for sales. This is well-known information. There's the video online. There's the big benefit. They're all singing the concert together. Paul McCartney accidentally knocks over the mic stand. What does Stevie Wonder do? Sticks out his hand and catches it. I bet he drives a car. I bet you. I bet you. There's one day somebody's going to be going on the highway, look to their left, be like, hey, look, Stevie Wonder's cruising down the street on a Ferrari. I'm telling you, he could see. He could see. Are there any contrarian stacks that you're really liking for the slate? If not, then we'll talk about our home run picks, and then we'll be done for the day.
They're kind of all contrarian. I'm going to say Baltimore is my favorite in that regard. Boston against the Chalky Detmers, kind of also in that same mold. But anyone but the Reds is contrarian.
It's true. I mean, the Reds. So here's our most recent ownership. The Reds as a stack, we've projected for 12% ownership. There's not a single other team projected for more than 7% ownership. So it is pretty spread out once you get beyond there. My contrarian stack, I'm going to be sticking with the New York Mets against Michael Wacha. Now let's do it. Let's wrap up the show before we kick it over to the NBA Live Before Lock, guys. And people in chat, play along with us. Let us know who you guys are picking to go yard today. Matt, who is the dong of the day?
I'm just going to stick with him. Give me Colton Cowser.
We got a couple questions in Discord that we'll hit on as well. So we'll get back to that. But I'm going to go Vlad. Vlad Jr. Project for single-digit ownership, and I am about double the field on him. So that's where I'm going. I'm going with Vlad as my home run pick. Einstein wants to know, how do we feel about the Chicago White Sox? Chicago White Sox, I don't have any like real strong take on them. They are projected for 4% ownership. That's literally the exact amount of exposure I have to them. So not a team I would prioritize in any kind of way. They just kind of exist on the slate. And then COVID Bryant II said, ask Shaq about the elevator and Stevie Wonder. Do you have his cell phone number? Or else kind of, he doesn't answer me very frequently. I'll try. I'll hit him up. I'll see what I could get out of him. All right. Home run picks from chat. Let's see what people had in here. We've got Todd Strong is going with Vinny Pasquantino. We got Dewan Drake is going with Benson. And then we've got, what else? Nicholas Robertson going with Ozzy Albies. We've got Arcathelza saying George Springer. And then we've got Rance in chat going with Jake Fraley. So we've got a wide arrangement of home run picks. Malukar says it on the same page as me. He said Vlad earlier. All right. I didn't mean to copy the pick of Malukar, but Malukar's going to Vladdy there. Andy Melman's going with Contreras. Pete Wysocki going with Pete Alonso. So all over the place in terms of different home run picks. So guys, thank you very much for watching. If you've not done yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you want to check out DraftKings Pick 6, if you guys are over on DraftKings, I'm sure a lot of you guys already are. Check out Pick 6 to see if that is available to play in your state. It's a really fun way to play props in like a GPP setting that's peer-to-peer. You're playing against other people as opposed to playing against the house. You could get really top-heavy payouts if you go 6 of 6 in all your picks and other people struggle. So Pick 6 over on DraftKings. Check it out if you guys haven't already played it. And Ace of Spade closing us out here by picking Barry Bonds for his own run pick. So, guys, thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Watch NBA Live Before Lock next. And then after NBA Live Before Lock, I'm going to be on Playback with Josh for the final Friday night slate of the NBA regular season. So check that out. Good luck tonight, guys. Peace out.